The boat I served on was a WW2-era diesel-electric attack submarine, a Gato Baleo-class hull rebuilt under the 1950s Guppy program. We were a tight-knit crew of roughly 65 men, crammed into about 310 feet of steel and wood, patrolling the Pacific like ghosts beneath the waves. In the 1960s Cold War, our mission was simple and unspoken. Keep quiet, keep watch, and creep through enemy waters. Every few hours we'd power down the diesels and run on batteries, knowing that even a long charge only gave us under a day submerged at slow speeds. The air in the control room was always a little thick with diesel fumes and nerves. I sat at the sonar station on the second watch, midnight to 4 a.m., tracing the faint signals of ocean life and distant ships on my scopes. Outside, the Pacific was ink black. Overhead, only 200 feet of steel separated us from moonlight. Below, thermoclines and layers of fish and plankton could fool an inexperienced sonarman. Our skipper was a quiet, grizzled lieutenant who'd served in World War II. He kept all lights dim on the bridge and radios off unless necessary, old routines from a time of real darkness and dread. I learned that after the war, the Navy had stripped our sub of her deck gun and extra engines and fitted a snorkel and extra batteries to eke out a few more knots underwater. She still made about 15 knots when fully charged. In many ways, we felt like survivors of a bygone era, patrolling in a steel coffin amid a brand new nuclear age. Yet our tools were crude, clicky sonar consoles, rotating binoculars and coded Morse whistles across the hull. Every patrol felt like waiting for the fog to lift, silent, watchful, and uneasy. On this particular night, we were passing south of Guam in fog. I'd been at my station for hours. The sonar ping was a lonely metronome in the quiet. The only response was the low hum of the electric engines. I wiped sleep from my eyes and adjusted the bearing marker. In the dim green light of the sound room, every shadow grew sharp. The other men bustled about in hushed tones, the quartermaster running through our position reports on the set, the radioman in the next compartment scribbling Morse code by ear. In a sub, every movement is careful, every sound stands out. Without warning, the sonar scopes twitched. A phantom pulse fluttered across the screen, a distant echo, almost a whisper. I leaned forward. It was the sort of faint ping you might brush off as a school of fish or ocean turbulence. Still, I jiggled the sensitivity knob, heart suddenly faster. The echo resolved into a little blip, then vanished. My stomach tightened. The sky map showed nothing nearby. Outside, through the glass, nothing moved except the ripples of our own wake. Did a periscope just flicker there? Could be nothing, I told myself, just current or thermocline. I dialed the set down to passive and listened. We had 3 sonar operators taking turns. Right now, I was the one on watch, and I hung on every sound. There was the consistent chuckle of the diesel's auxiliary motor behind me, the distant thunk of machinery. Then, very softly, came a new sound. Faint taps, like someone gently rapping the hull from the outside. Tss, tss, tss. Each tap barely more than a needle's click against steel. I froze. Every man on a submarine knows the old folklore about touches in the deep. My mouth went dry as a salty voice from my past whispered in my ear, "Don't respond to silent paps on the hull." I knew that line well. It was an unofficial rule passed down from old submariners, a warning too strange to write in a manual. I swallowed and didn't say a word. The tapping continued, on and off, soft as a heartbeat. My hands hovered inches above the controls. I cleared my throat, forcing my breath steady. The skipper's voice crackled over the pipe. "Status?" I replied with the usual report, still at periscope depth, traffic clear. But inside, I was screaming. Those taps wouldn't be audible to him, but somewhere in the hull, something was knifing through the darkness. I let the sonar ping run active again. The screen was empty. Nothing. We'd all heard sailors' tales about that sort of thing. If a vessel has no wake, dive immediately, the old captain had said during our training cruise. If a name is called in a dead man's voice, do not acknowledge it. Such stories felt like ghost wives' tales until they start to come true. My blood ran cold at the taps, but I clamped my jaw shut. No response at all, just steady silence from the crew. My pulse finally slowed and the restlessness of the night crept back. Maybe it was just biology, the rats in the bow rubbing their tails on the metal, or the ocean itself brushing past. The periscope watch rotated, the crew changed duties. I logged the encounter as possible banging noise, source unknown. No one else mentioned it aloud. In a sub, you learn that the worst reaction you can have is to panic. You just keep going.
2 days later, on the North Pacific Patrol Line, the real nightmare began. Midday came with shimmering heat, no wind, an oily mirror of calm on the water's surface. We were submerged at periscope depth, scanning with passive sonar for any ship traffic in the area. By now, the crew was jumpy. Every cough echoed too loud, every creak of rivets in the hull was a portent. Suddenly, the sonar scope lit up. An unmistakable contact, a huge metal mass moving. But the reading was wrong. It had no clear propeller signature, no distinct ping like a live vessel. It looked like an old cargo ship, maybe a tanker, long, narrow, displacement heavy. But no ping at all, no wake chop. The captain barked, "Report!" I read off the bearing and approximate distance. Contact appears ahead 3,000 yards, matching large steel hull, but sensors detect no screw noise, no wake on the surface. My voice was calm, but inside I was racing. The entire crew crowded around the scopes. The still sea outside through the periscope was empty, not a ripple, not a wisp of smoke on the horizon. The lieutenant's eyes narrowed. He had never acknowledged the taps our radio as anything real, but here was something plainly visible to everyone's instruments. "Chart it," he ordered. Could be an American refueling ship lost from our notices. There was a brief hope. I punched coordinates into the navigation. The echo on sonar was dense, layered, old ship construction. "We have an echo with the profile of a WW2 freighter or sloop," I said slowly. "Submerged radar and sonar show it clearly." The skipper frowned. "USS detailed logs say nothing. We're not supposed to be anywhere near any old wrecks on this grid. Check records from the Pacific Theater." Downstairs, I rummaged through historical data. The Pacific was dotted with sunken vessels from the war, carriers, destroyers, freighters torpedoed, gunned, or mined. Most were out of our way, and declassified location data was sketchy. All I could find was a truncated note. SS Exeter Star, American tanker, torpedoed, 1944, coordinates unknown. Not much to go on. Back at sonar, the contact was closer now. We matched our depth to the phantom ship. The rule from boot camp crept in again. If a vessel has no wake, dive immediately. Our sub was already under the surface, but we quickly sealed ventilation and dropped down an extra 20 feet. The water pressure increased, a low rumble in the hull. Outside, it was colder. Even at 50 feet, the contact was surreal. The sonar picture was uncanny. It drew the outline of a long-ago tanker with its bow buried in weeds. The acoustic signature had no rolling hum of living engines, instead, a dull, static reverberation. Through the periscope, the skipper aimed cautiously. His jaw dropped. There, on the mirror-smooth water, was something utterly impossible. The faint outline of a rusted silhouette, bottomless black and barely above the surface. She was pitch black and empty, but the sun glinted off one weather-beaten mast, a broken flare port house, a shattered bridge deck. The dead ship was floating exactly as if she were still afloat, and following right behind her, crushing the water to foam, was nothing. We were alone. We surfed up a bit to confirm. The ship's profile was only visible from hull to mast. No crew, no lights, nothing moving. Not even a wake. The sub's radar got 0 returns. That thing didn't exist as an object to our modern equipment. Only sonar saw it, and the periscope's silhouettes in the early light. "Impossible," breathed one of the men. A shiver ran through the boat. The captain shot us a look, entirely composed, but his hand trembling on the lens. "Gentlemen," he said quietly, "steady now. It's just another wreck we're passing." His voice was measured, but I saw doubt flicker. I checked my sound gear over and over for a glitch. Everything was functional. The Phantom ship followed our bow, maintaining station as if we were actually towing it. I slid through layers of sonar frequencies. The ship's metal warped the signal strangely, but there it was. On chart, we drifted gradually, 173 fathoms above an empty stretch of seafloor, no official wreck listed. All I could think, that tanker sank in 44. We were moving 57 years later, locked into its ancient wake. We broke formation. The captain ordered, "Full back now, quiet engines." The boat lurched. We stopped 500 yards from the dead ship's phantom bow. Everyone was on edge. I could hear my own heart pounding in my ears. The sonar operator clicked off the active ping. In the quiet, I listened. Or perhaps it was not quiet. A faint knocking, the same tapping from before, vibrated through the steel. No one moved. "Keep clear of prop wash," the captain cautioned. It felt absurd, like we were setting sail with no one steering. Moments passed. Then, as if granted some courtesy, the unmoving haze began to fade. The radar returned an all clear, sonar nothing. On periscope, the ghost tanker vanished under blue waves. It was like we'd passed through a curtain of cold fog. Just as suddenly as it came, it was gone. But the certainty it ever existed had seared itself onto our souls. The silence left behind was heavy, deafening. No one aboard spoke. Below decks, engines idled. On the bridge, the sunlight had fully come. In the end, we decided not to mention the contact to base, not to raise alarms. We logged it briefly, "Encountered unknown derelict." It would raise questions, and the captain didn't want the noise. The men picked at their meager lunches. A petty officer finally asked in a trembling voice, "Sir, did anyone else see it?" The skipper took a deep breath. "I did," he admitted softly, eyes unblinking on the empty horizon. "We all had. This boat has rules for a reason." I understood.
After that passing, paranoia crept aboard like a fog. At night, we held an extra man station watch on the sonar. Each man volunteered to sit alone, listening, fingers on foam cushions, staring at the dark glass of screens. The bathysphere beneath had grown hostile. Every sonar return was suspect. A school of tuna, an edge of a sandbar, a dory in fog. Each triggered a jump in the belly. Flickering lights began. First, just a bulb in the engine room stuttered. Then the corridor lights pooled into shadows. I touched the wall of the sonar room and felt it warm with electricity and dread. Outside, our sub rested on midnight blue. The crew became moody, haunted by dreams. No one mentioned ghosts, but we all felt them. One watch, I half dreamed as I monitored the ping. I heard footsteps over the intercom, boots on steel, far more human than the night air should allow. But the order to report a 0330 deco had not come. I snapped awake. In the speakers at Station 4, someone was shouting my name. "Mulholland! Mulholland!" It was Officer Tamura's voice, oddly slow. I tore my headset off. Tamura sat across the wardroom table, silent and terrified, mouth open. No one else was there. The intercom clipped off. The old rule thundered, "If a name is called in a dead man's voice, do not acknowledge it." I didn't. Tamura knew it was his voice, but something was horribly off. Later, he admitted he imagined it, or that we both had. Either way, everyone's eyes widened, looking for phantoms, for someone to blame. On the last night before we were scheduled to slip away to port, at periscope depth we felt it again. A light breeze, and faintly, the image of that derelict tanker again standing crosswise on our hull, looming in the periscope sky. Someone gasped at the monitor. For a second, we might have been dead men on deck, but as quick as it appeared, it wavered and was gone. We dove, 300 feet this time, deeper than we'd ever dared on patrol. behind the old ship's wake on the sonar? We couldn't say. The men huddled in the dim glow of the ballast pumps. Above us, the world was silent except for our breathing. Beneath us, nothing was moving. The skipper's voice came over the speakers, steady and tired. "Hold here. We go deeper. Everybody, sit." None of us needed to be told. For hours, we stayed under as far as the sea would allow. I worked the sonar, ears straining for any clue. The tanks behind on oxygen ran low. The sub grew musty and warm. We were trapped with our thoughts. When we finally surfaced at first light, all that remained was sunlit morning calm. The skipper gave the order to head home. We turned east for Pearl Harbor, our official course to recharge at Oahu and pretend this was only routine practice. But every man aboard knew better. Our old rules had saved us, and now they were etched in ice among our veins. We reached San Diego and then home port with radio silence. Back in port, everyone acted as if nothing had happened. The Navy's paper said we ran exercises, tracked nothing of interest. The rumor we saw something was all word of mouth, and we swore never to discuss those whispers out loud. Years later, now grown old, I still feel it sometimes. When the seas are calm and the night is quiet, I half expect to hear a quiet Morse tap or a distant voice on the radio. I remember that night watch glow, the hum of the sonar, and the way that ghost of a ship materialized into our reality. There was no wake, no propulsion. It defied logic, but it was there. I never found an official explanation. The Navy's archives have no note of any ship there, 40 years ago or now. All I have is my silence and those 3 old warnings etched into memory. Part of me thinks we glimpsed something not of this world, a danger we avoided by simply obeying the old rules. Whatever it was, it left no logs, no wreckage. Sometimes I wonder if the spirit of the drowned men still wanders out there, beneath the waves we paddle by every day. I survived that patrol, and on the surface I've gone on living, but the memory stays. Even now I'll catch myself at night staring out at empty water, afraid to see something, or someone, looking back. No one knows for sure what we passed that night, but it haunts me. Like a sonar blip that fades but never truly disappears, the question remains: who else sailed those ghostly waters with us? Later, when dawn was leaking gray through the periscope, the radio in the wardroom crackled with strange noise. We had long since shivered off the cold of the deep. Now the sub had dived deeper for warmth, hull creaking softly under pressure. I sat in the sonar room, turning in my old duty log. The skipper had surfaced the sub to a few dozen feet to charge batteries. The air outside was still, no storm, just an eerie quiet. Abruptly, the radio man's Morse interrupter fell silent, and static filled the wardroom. The warbling hiss and clicks came into my speakers, then cleared to faint tones. A voice, male, fatigued, broke through. "See you in the..." It was in plain English, but distorted, as if broadcast from 1,000 feet of ocean. My head snapped up. On a tactical frequency, random voices were unheard of. "I'm hearing something," I muttered. The second soundman on watch at sonar sat bolt upright. The entire sub stiffened. Even the diesel's hum died. Outside, only gray waves spoke in whispers against the hull. We waited. Then the crackling came again, stronger. "Mark, good morning. Mark, see you in the..." That name, my name, in a tired drawl. My head jerked toward the speaker. I clenched my fists. Beads of sweat stood out on my forehead. This could not be normal static.
The uttered voice carried the weight of years of salt and sorrow, a man who sounded strangely familiar.
An old rule splintered into my mind just as it had before. If a name is called in a dead man's voice, do not acknowledge it. I resisted every instinct to answer. "Hello?" I almost mouthed back, but I forced myself to keep silent. The rest of the crew had drawn in close. We simply stared at the horn speaker, faces draining of color. For a long moment, nothing. Then, "See you in the afterlife." The voice ended in a sob. The static returned. It was the final proof of what our instincts said. This was no enemy transmission or radio test. It was something else entirely. No one on deck had called us. The frequency was inactive. Where had that voice come from? After what felt like hours, though it was only a minute, the radio man slumped. The static faded, replaced by the mundane whine of generators. I felt sick to my stomach. We exchanged terrified looks. The quartermaster finally cleared his throat and said, "Sir, no other traffic in our logs. It must have been an echo." His face was ashen. Should we surface to investigate? Our skipper shook his head slowly. No. A half-smile twitch formed on his lips. Not humor, but weariness. "Remember what they say, man. Don't spark a stranger's soul." He tapped the side of his head. "I know it sounds crazy, but remember the lessons. No answer, no acknowledgement. Keep to routine." His eyes met mine for a long moment, and I saw something old and sad there. Then he turned away. No one spoke for the rest of watch. We continued the dive, instruments humming steadily. The list of old warnings was repeating in my head like a chant. No knocks, no names, no questions. The control room felt colder, the air tighter. At breakfast, the next watch brought donuts and stale coffee, but no one ate. We all looked out the tiny portholes like those aboard the Flying Dutchman, half expecting to see ghostly sails or spectral lights flicker by. Only the same empty sea.